The Baltimore Ravens lost to the Kansas City Chiefs in devastating fashion in the AFC Championship game, and we have former All-Pro linebacker Shawne Merriman on the show to help break down how the Ravens can recover from the loss, talk about the Joe Hortiz hire for the Los Angeles Chargers, and a lot more. A lot to get to here on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, coming to you from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, thanks so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available for you on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where you can hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well. And also in audio form, you can subscribe, follow along wherever you get your podcast. We're 5 days a week here on Locked On Ravens, plus bonus content, even in the offseason, which for the Ravens, again, we're unfortunately in after they lose to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your best bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Again, Monday through Friday here on Locked On Ravens, we bring you Ravens news, analysis, updates. That will include offseason, where we'll do some roster breakdown, some free agency previews, draft as well. We have a lot coming on Locked On Ravens, so it's the same show, both audio and video form. Tell a friend, tell a family member. We have the best daily Ravens coverage here for you. I'm really excited for this episode today. We have Shawne Merriman coming on the show in the first two segments to talk Ravens and to talk a little bit of Los Angeles Chargers, and obviously the crossover works a little bit, right, with Joe Hortiz going from the Ravens to the Chargers as their next general manager. So Shawne will talk with us about everything. We'll talk Ravens in the first segment, about the Ravens losing in the championship game, how they can recover and bounce back from that, a little bit about Lamar as well and the core that they have. And then in the second part of the show, we'll talk more about Joe Hortiz, some of Shawne's background, as well as some MMA conversation as well. Shawne has a great post-career venture going, and it's successful, and it's really exciting. So we're going to talk with Shawne about all that, and then I'll round out the show by myself, talk about some of the crazy coaching updates and staff updates for the Ravens, because many people are getting interviews for this Ravens team going elsewhere potentially. So nothing official as of yet outside of Joe Hortiz. We'll talk about the latest at the time of this recording on that. So any further ado, let's first get into our conversation with Shawne Merriman. Joining the show, three-time All-Pro, Pro Bowler, and obviously a Maryland legend. It is Shawne Merriman, played for the Chargers and the Bills. And Shawne, I'm happy to have you on the show because we actually have some Ravens and Chargers news to cross over about a little bit later.
Yeah.
But the big storyline, it's first in Baltimore about the AFC Championship game. Baltimore loses that game 17-10 to Kansas City, and I think just disappointment all the way around for the team, for the organization, for the players and coaches. And obviously, you had the opportunity to play in the AFC Championship with San Diego against the undefeated at the time Patriots, and obviously it didn't go the way you guys wanted to. I mean, what's the message in that locker room after a game, going through the whole season to get to that point and ultimately falling short? How do you even begin to look to, I guess, bouncing back or flushing that game away?
It's tough, man. And the harder, the first thing they're going to do is watch the film. They're probably watching the film today or watched it yesterday and look at that film and say, you know what? We gave it up, right? And this is why there's a lot of similarities back when I was watching that game and situations I've been in, right? There were some penalties that could have been avoided, right? Flowers, the taunting penalty, stuff like that. But man, that guy's ceiling is extremely high. I mean, he's going to be a star for a long time. But again, it goes with being young, right? Being in that moment, understanding what's on the line. This is not a regular season game. And typically, when you get to the AFC Championship, or any championship game in general, the margin of error is so small. It's so small, and you don't realize that as a young team because you're so good, you automatically have this feeling that you can get back there. So you're not really conscious about how big that platform is. A couple of things could have been avoidable, but for the most part, man, they're going to be looking at that film and say we gave this game up because we were the better team, and they were the better team.
Yeah, and the playoffs, the better team sometimes doesn't always win the game, and it's a one-game series it's almost like a season within another season every single week in the playoffs. But you made a good point there and I think everybody knows how hard it is to win in the NFL and how hard it is to get to these championship games and to these moments. And we look at the AFC, Shawne. I mean, the Ravens, they're going to be there with Lamar and Zay and those guys. They have a chance. But you talk about some of these other teams in the conference that are maybe on the up and up, like the Chargers. The Bengals get Joe Burrow back, for example. I could go on and on with that list. I mean, based off your playing experience and just how hard it was in the NFL to win back when you were playing, it's the same exact thing today. I mean, if you're a Ravens fan, I think the worry here is, are they ever going to get back? Are they ever going to have another opportunity? Because, I mean, no two teams are the same.
Yeah, and that's tough, right? Because I always say this, you got about a 3 or 4 year window with that team that you have in order to win. I mean, you starting to see already people in the front office moving. Players are going to be moved. They're not going to have the same team roster-wise next year. And so when you look at the nucleus, you got about a 3 or 4 year window to really go out and try to win a championship. That's what you have. And I'm not saying that window is closing at all. They'll have a great team next year, but like you said, the teams in that division gets better. The road to get there is a little bit tougher, and people are just getting better. I dealt with it in the conference where we used to kick KC and Raiders' butt all the time. I mean, when I played, we destroyed them. And over the years, they just progressively gotten better. Now KC is the best team in that division, and so overall, man, I think that it's going to be a learning experience for a lot of them. I hate the narratives that's going to be painted for Lamar Jackson because he had an outstanding year. He's done unimaginable things. But that dark cloud is always going to be lurking just a little bit. Like, hey, can he get over this hump, man? He's such a tremendous player. And we measure championships, man. That's the thing. We measure championships so much, no matter how great a player is, right? Lamar Jackson will go down as one of the best to do it. But until he wins that championship, he won't necessarily get mentioned up there with the top tier and the best to ever do it. He has to cross that boundary, get over that roadblock before he gets up in that talk, man. But you can't take the season away from him. How dominant they were, how physical they were. Roquan Smith and Queen inside, the leadership that they had. Odell coming there, Flowers having the year he had. I mean, you can't get away from the great things they did during the season.
And you mentioned Lamar, and I agree. Some of the narratives that are going to be painted about him for the next 7+ months as we lead up to the next season, some of them are going to probably get a little ugly. But do you think it's a matter of him just taking that step and being in the AFC Championship environment? It was his first time. And look, we know Patrick Mahomes has been there before. He's a 2-time champion, 6 straight AFC Championship games. Was this just something where Lamar had to realize him physically being in the championship moment of an AFC championship? Because he had never been there before.
Yeah, and you never want to come out and say that as a player, right? Obviously, your goal when it's before the season starts is to win a championship. I mean, that's what the talk is before the season starts, during the season. Guys, it's about the Super Bowl. That's why we play this game. But he made a huge jump. He made a huge jump to, kind of people what they said and the narrative that they painted before here. Like I said, all that gets erased when you actually win one. And I still do believe that they got an opportunity with that team. If a good portion of that team stays together, they'll have an opportunity for the next couple of years. Now, you got to deal with the division getting a little better and Joe Burrow and all the people you just named in general, that division getting better. But for the most part, if they can keep that team together, they'll always have a shot over the next couple of years.
Still a lot to get to here with Shawne in the second part of the show. We'll talk about Joe Hortiz and the Los Angeles Chargers, as well as Shawne's background and MMA training for NFL players, plus what Shawne has going on right now. Stay tuned. A lot to get to on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the parts you need, all the prices you want. It's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Also, items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. We're back here, Locked On Ravens, our second segment, as we're still talking with Shawne Merriman, former All-Pro linebacker, spent time with both the San Diego Chargers at the time and then the Buffalo Bills. a Maryland legend too, played at University of Maryland, and obviously grew up in the area as well. We'll talk about the Chargers a little bit with Joe Hortiz going from the Ravens to the Chargers, getting the general manager role out there. Plus, again, more about Shawne's background in MMA. So without any further ado, let's get right back into the conversation. Let's just get right into the Chargers here because they are linked to the Ravens in now multiple different ways. You have the Harbaugh connection, and obviously John stole from Jim a little bit at Michigan, and so it's only right for Jim to repay the favor to John and take some of his talent away. And you see Joe Hortiz get the general manager job in Los Angeles, and this has been, I think, something that's been in the works for a while in terms of Joe earning this role. And you kind of now have people saying, Shawne, that the Chargers have won this hiring cycle with getting Jim Harbaugh in there, a culture tone setter, a culture changer, and then Joe Hortiz, who has been the architect of a lot of these Ravens drafts and finding prospects. I mean, how excited are you? I know you're still involved with the organization and you have plenty. You saw on Twitter, you're very happy with the hire of Joe Hortiz. How excited are you about the direction, at least the early direction that Jim Harbaugh and Joe Hortiz give the Chargers? I'm
very excited, man. I think the Chargers sent a message about the sense of urgency of winning right now, right? Reestablishing some of that faith in the fan base, keeping that hype moving. You know, it's not easy to move from San Diego to go up to LA, rebuild a fan base, because they did. They lost a good amount of fans when they made that move, and they did a great job at rebuilding that fan base again. And now what you do is, after having a guy like Brandon Staley, and this is no shots at Brandon Staley, but that excitement wasn't there because people felt like the leadership role wasn't available. He didn't have that leadership to take guys to the next level. And I guess we found out more about that at the end of his tenure, right? When things really started to crumble, that he just wasn't a guy for the job. But with hiring Joe Hortiz, bringing in Jim Harbaugh, making these kind of hires, you send a message about what you're trying to do, right? This isn't a rebuilding stage. You bring a guy in, hope that the team can get better in a couple of years. You got a franchise quarterback. You got a all-pro left tackle. You got multiple all-pros on that defense, guys who can play. So they can win now. If this is a rebuilding year or a couple of rebuilding years, I don't think you go out and get a guy like Jim Harbaugh. We'll bring in Joe Hortiz. They're really sending a message saying, guys, we got to win. We're going to win now. And that restores a lot of faith back into the fan base.
And I think you're bringing it in, too, from organizations. Michigan, that college organization, obviously Jim Harbaugh being a champion this year, but Harbaugh's a winner. I mean, we saw him even during his NFL tenure with San Francisco. He didn't win the championship, but he instilled a culture there, which was awesome. And Joe Hortiz coming from the Ravens organization. But Shawne, you mentioned a little bit about the Chargers going from San Diego and going to Los Angeles. When you were drafted by San Diego, it must have been a little weird for you because you're a Maryland guy, right? You grew up in Maryland, You went to Maryland, and you going out to the West Coast, were you just kind of like, man, I have no idea what's going out over here on the West Coast? Or did you have some sort of an idea of, hey, when I get to San Diego, I know what the culture is going to be, and I know how to kind of navigate my way around the West Coast?
Man, I never even saw palm trees in person before in my life. So flying over there on my pre-visit to the Chargers, flying over to the water and seeing the palm trees, I thought I was in some sort of movie, right? You step off the plane, it's 76 degrees out there, no humidity. I'm like, man, what did I do so good on this earth to get me drafted out here in San Diego? And not to mention, they just had a pretty good year, right? I think they went 12-4, something like that the year before. So they actually came off a really good season, which normally doesn't happen, right? When you get a really good team like that, they have, later draft pick, and because of what happened with the Giants and Eli Manning, then they were able to get that extra pick with me. And it was life-changing for me, man. I've never been to the West Coast before, and kind of going out there, reestablishing myself, being the East Coast guy. Kind of finding out the history of the Chargers, like how, I remember one of the first things I learned and how big and important Julius Sayal was, not just to the team, man, but to the city. I mean, you're talking about somebody who was a superhero in people's eyes. And so you learn what he did, what charities he worked with, who in the community he connected with, all his doctors, trainers, therapists. I mean, I went through and I got everything that Julius Sayal got, man. And it was one of those things that I was fortunate to be in that situation, to come in the locker room with LaDainian Tomlinson and Antonio Gates, Phillip Rivers, Lorenzo Neal. Dude, I mean, you don't get Donnie Edwards. The list goes on of guys I walked into the locker room with that I looked up to and it kind of brought me along the way.
Did you kind of have a welcome to the NFL moment? Maybe you walk in that locker room for the first time, and you're like, man, that's really Antonio Gates over there, man. Or was it on the field? Did you hit somebody and you're like, man, I'm really here? Did you have that typical, like, welcome to the NFL type deal?
I hate saying this because this is my brother and I love him to death, but I lit up O'Neal the third day of practice when it was my first day of us having equipment, right? And so I had a contract dispute where I didn't show up during the off season. So that was my first day. Fans, about 3,000 to 5,000 people out there watching at practice. And it was my first showcase in front of everybody. No one's seen me the entire off season. So I just remember the talks like, who does rookie think he is? He's not showing up. And I'm reading, and I'm pissed, right? I'm level 10. Like, I cannot wait to get out there. My first person I got was Lorenzo Neal in the one-on-one drills, but he came in and got me right back. So it was one of those things, man, where I kind of sat back and, to get a chance not only to work with guys like Lorenzo Neal. Man, I used to, I'll never forget. I guess one of those moments you're talking about is Lorenzo Neal coming up to ask me if I can work out with him after practice. And this in my head, this is the best fullback to me of all time. And, he's still in the weight room hitting hard. And so we 2-3 days a week after practice, me and Lorenzo Neal, we go get extra workouts in. So I was fortunate to have that, man, to have that moment and come around those guys.
Now, San Diego nabbed you with the 12th pick, but did you know you were going there? Were there any other teams that you thought, hey, maybe I could go a little earlier here, or maybe if the Chargers don't take me, I'd go a little later to this team? Did you have any of that?
Yeah, it was 1 to San Francisco. They went with Alex Smith. It was 3 to Cleveland, possibly. They went with Braylon Edwards. Then you had Detroit at number 10 and went with Mike Williams. Dallas, 11, they went to DeMarcus Ware and me. So I knew it was going to be one of those 4, right? I knew it was because they all, for the most part, no one thought I would be on the draft board after 10. But they, anybody after 10, I got told by 3 or 4 different teams, if I was there, they were taking me. They didn't think that I was going to be there in the draft. So it worked out, man. I think ultimately it was a place that I walked into that, Junior Seau had kind of paved the way and just brought that kind of excitement to the city. So for me, it was just an opportunity to pass the torch and take it a little further, right? And so, yeah, man, it was, incredible thing. One of the best things, honestly, man, that ever happened to me in my life because I got a chance to go out and build something that I didn't really have a footprint in just yet.
And you went out there and you dominated from the jump at the NFL level. And I think when it comes to training for NFL players, I mean, a bunch of different things can kind of go into that. And some of them, it's not just the lifting and it's not just the cardio. A bunch of stuff goes into it. And I think for you, you've been very involved, obviously, with Lights Out and the MMA world and kind of figuring that out. I'm curious about how that all started for you. Was it because you were just training and that was a way to get you ahead at the NFL level? Or was it something you kind of had been growing up with and figured it out?
So I grew up in Prince George's County, Maryland, and I had a family who were professional boxers. So I grew up around boxers. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, like Riddick Bowe come into the neighborhood. And I remember seeing Evander Holyfield when I was, about 12, 13 years old. And it would be championship boxers all around. That Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia area produced a lot of boxers. So I just gradually grew up just naturally anyway, boxing. And I remember in 2005, I was in Jay Glazer's gym from Fox Sports, and I was hitting the mitts. And he kind of looked over and said, "Man, you can box. Have you ever tried MMA?" And he said, "I think it'll help you out with football." And I said, "Look, if it helped me out with football, I'm in." Right. So he texted me an address. Next day, I show up in a gym in Los Angeles. It was Jay Glazer on my left, and then Randy Couture on my right. This is my first day learning MMA with Randy Couture. And what I was allowed to see during that time was how his leverage and how he was able to use his body and do certain things, right? And that's when I knew that it can help me out with the hand combat drills. As an outside linebacker and pass rusher, you have to be active and violent with your hands. And that's what MMA helped out a lot. You see a lot of guys are picking it up during the offseason. Tua, who used it, jiu-jitsu so he can learn how to fall. And he was healthy practically the whole entire year. So I think it's beneficial for a lot of guys to pick up some kind of combat sport. So fast forward, retired 2013. I launched Lights Out Extreme Fight in 2019, unfortunately, like a little while before the pandemic. And then, now we're on Fubo TV, Fubo Sports. We got a huge event coming up February 16th. In Long Beach, California. So everybody out there that want more information, go to lightsoutxf.com or watch us live on Fubo TV, Fubo Sports. We'll be on Fubo. The
Lights Out celebration became kind of like a staple for you. And everybody's curious about the origin story. I have to ask, was that just you coming up with it on your own? Was there a specific game that you kind of thought of it in as it was going on?
Yeah, so I went to Frederick Douglass High School up in Marlboro, Maryland. I ended up knocking out 4 kids in one game. And I remember after the game, I had about 20 or 25 students run up to me and say, man, you knocked those guys' lights out. And I looked at them and said, yeah, you know what? Call me lights out. I didn't think nothing of it. Remember getting to school on Monday, I got my book bag on and in my books in my hand, and I'm walking around the school and people were saying, what's up, lights, short for lights out. And it traveled so fast. Mind you, this pre-social media, right? This wasn't like a viral moment that got on YouTube the next day. This was like all word of mouth. So anyway, I went home, begged my mom to let me get a lights out tattoo. I had a friend of mine to draw a light switch with a hand cutting the lights out on my right forearm. So I went in there, never forget, knocking on the door after school. I said, Mom, this lights out thing's gonna be big one day. I want to get a lights out tattoo. She looked at me and said, boy, get the hell out the room. And so after that, man, I bugged her every day for 2 weeks. She finally took me to go get the tattoo. So, when I have a big hit or I knock someone out or big play and I do the lights out dance, I'm just flicking the light switch on and off. Now, I didn't plan that. I just pointed at the light switch. I had a big hit my freshman year at Maryland, live on ESPN. First time I was on national TV, playing Georgia Tech, wide receiver coming across the middle. And I knocked him down. He got up and went straight to the sidelines, right? And I pointed at the tattoo. Now, I didn't think nothing of it, but the crowd got louder and I kind of jumped with it a little bit when I got toward the sideline. So that's how the whole lights out thing was born, man. And I just, you had to earn it on every level, right? You can't have a nickname like lights out and walk in there and somebody's putting it in your butt every play. So trust me, I had to go out and go get it every day.
Yeah, now it's a brand, and I know that you have a lot coming up with that, but it seems like you knew what you wanted to do post-playing career. It felt maybe that moment in the gym with Jay Glazer kind of sparked, that interest for you, and you say, hey, this could be something big. Did you kind of have an idea before you retired of like, hey, I know this is what I want to do when I end up deciding to hang it up?
Yeah, no, in fact, I went out and bought up all the naming rights and trademarks of Lights Out when I was 21 years old. And so, I started selling clothes in some of the biggest retail stores in the country. DTLR was one of my partners there. That's big in Baltimore. There, DTLR has been my partner for a long time. And also Tilly's on the West Coast. It was in about 90 Tilly's. So I was in the clothing business for a while, but I knew that Lights Out was a brand, right? And it resonated to what I'm doing right now. And obviously, I had a passion and love for the sport, but also too, because I went straight into TV, I understood production and how TV works. So it was a match made in heaven to something I wanted to do when I got done anyway. And it was easier for me to make that transition, man. I mean, I was already training. I wanted to be around the sport, wanted to be around the business for a long time. And it was just a match made in heaven.
And I know you got Lights Out 14 coming up, and I know you have a big card you're excited about. How is going through this process of seeing Lights Out grow to get to the point you are now? I mean, how cool has it been for you?
It's been amazing, man. We've having 70% and 90% jumps in viewership on Fubo. We air a week later on Billy's as well, and Amazon Freevee and a couple other platforms. But it's been amazing to see it grow this much. I mean, two things, right? We don't grow unless the people watch. That's one thing. Fans are liking the fights that we're putting on, the production. And we've been just out there everywhere, getting the opportunity to come here and talk about Lights Out, man. Bringing some of these football eyes over and watch a few of our fights has been very beneficial to the business. And soon we're going to start announcing a few former athletes that's also coming to fight. Actually, on this card we got coming February 16th, AJ Hodgkins, who played linebacker at Oregon with Justin Herbert when Justin Herbert was there, I believe. He's fighting on this card. So it's going to be a big deal, man. And the rate that we're growing, we got some really awesome news, some more distribution of platforms that we're going to be showing on in the next few months or so. So it's great, man. Don't get me wrong. It's a crazy, hectic business, right? I mean, 4 hours of live TV, you got, the commission and fighters and venues and production. It's a lot, but I wouldn't want to do anything else, man. This is what I wanted to do.
So it's on Fubo, and where social media, where can everybody find you, and where can you get more information?
Yeah, you can find us at Lights Out XF on Twitter and X now and IG. And just keep following us, man. We're constantly making announcements. In fact, when we get off, I'm going to announce giving away some cage side seats to our next fight. So I always try to do stuff with the fans. I think that without the fans, man, it's not possible to do what we do. Them buying tickets, them showing up, watching us on Fubo. And just reposting. I don't even ask fans to repost our fights. You look on it, they just reposted because they're coming or they know someone who's coming. And it's just been a lot of support in that way. But, being in this industry, we love for our guys to get an opportunity to go fight in the UFC, right? That's the ultimate goal. We got 2 or 3 guys that's probably going to go right after this fight and fight on Dana White's Contender Series possibly. So just having that leverage to get these guys to the next level has been great.
And I got to round it out with one more question about, with Baltimore and the NFL, there are a bunch of young pass rushers in this league that obviously want to get to the level you were at and get to the level that so many of these great pass rushers have been to. With the Ravens, it's guys like Anafe Owe, David Ajabo, Tavius Robinson. But to any young pass rusher or to any maybe NFL player, would you recommend MMA as a form of training that they should look at in the offseason?
Yeah, no doubt about it. It completely changed my body for one, because ain't nothing like, those 3 5-minute rounds. And then when a guy's on top of you and you got to control your breathing and you got to, still, because first thing that the players lose when they get tired, their mental go, their everything they've practiced. Also, too, just getting better with the hands, leverage, learning how to fall and turn a corner around those big outside left and right tackles. So there's so many great things in the sport of MMA that help guys in football, and also injury, man. I mean, being flexible, opening your hips, and having that capabilities of doing that. So I recommend any former athlete, or even current athletes is playing, go do some combat drills, get some MMA training in. You don't have to take a fight, but definitely go get the work in, because it'll help you on the field.
Really, really great talking with Shawne. I thought he provided so much great insight and gave us some stories about his life adjusting to the West Coast. I mean, everything he gave us in terms of answers and a little insight into himself, his background, and why he's so passionate about what he's doing now. I really enjoyed the conversation with Shawne. So again, be sure to check out everything Shawne has going on with Lights Out and Lights Out 14. All that will be in the description below. But coming up in the final part of the show, we'll get back into Ravens talk as we start talking about the coaching potential changes that could happen for this team. Stay tuned, plenty to get to on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is sponsored by FanDuel, and happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday, it's all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. And it's kind of still painful for me to talk about the Super Bowl right now, considering the Ravens, in my opinion, should be in it, but they didn't deserve to win that game against Kansas City, and we're not talking about them in the Super Bowl. But when I do watch it, the game is obviously great for the most part, but it's the food, the commercials, and more. But there's a bet that I do like in the Super Bowl, and it's Christian McCaffrey over rushing yards, and Christian McCaffrey really anytime touchdown. If the 49ers run the ball against the Chiefs defense, which a certain team didn't do in the AFC Championship game, I think that's pretty likely that it hits. And FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W or 2 or maybe 3. Not only can you bet who will win the Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, and how many points will be scored, and so much more. New customers joining today will get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. This is FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We're back here rounding out Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here. Again, really appreciate everybody tuning in, making Locked On Ravens your first listen. Be sure to subscribe, follow along in audio form and video form as well. It's been really great to see the support here on Locked On Ravens, the show grow. I mean, it was that whole run, the Ravens run they had, although it ended this in disappointing fashion, still, it was incredible to kind of go through that and experience all the joy. And obviously it came crashing down at the end, but I can't thank everybody enough for the support in video form, in audio form, on subtext, social media. It's been incredible, and we're only going to keep going here on Locked On Ravens. Again, 5 days a week during the offseason too. We don't stop. So we'll have more interviews, and we'll do draft talk, free agent talk. And honestly, the Shawne Merriman conversation we had with Shawne, I think it was outside, the Ravens segment in the first segment. He provided great Ravens insight for us. But the second segment, we learned a little bit about Shawne. We get to talk to him about the Chargers. I think it was a nice break from just for a segment, right, of Ravens conversation where it all still relates back to everything goes hand in hand. But I thank everybody for that loss. It's painful, and sometimes you just got to take a step back for a couple of minutes, and I'm glad we were able to do that with Shawne. So, again, really enjoyed talking with Shawne, but let's get into some coaching updates. And look, I really do not know. I'm going to try to do this off the top of my head, but there are so many coaches on this Ravens team that are getting interviews. I don't know if I'm going to be able to hit on all of them. I'm going to try, though, and I think I will. I think I have it down in my head. So Mike Macdonald obviously is the obvious guy we got to start with first. He is in the running for both the Washington Commanders job and the Seattle Seahawks job at the time of this recording. And we know that Ben Johnson is going to return to Detroit. Bobby Slowick returning to Houston. Even Gerard Johnson, the Texans quarterback coach, was getting offensive coordinator looks. He's returning to Houston. Loyalty was the theme of yesterday. Now, Mike Macdonald met with the Commanders on Monday in Seattle yesterday. I believe Seattle went back, Seattle came into Baltimore and then they left and went back to Seattle, and they're now in the decision-making process. So maybe we will get an idea of who that coach will be. Will it be Macdonald? Will it be Dan Quinn potentially? I know Aaron Glenn, Detroit's defensive coordinator, has been in some conversations. Anthony Weaver, we're going to talk about in a second. But Mike Macdonald is by far and away the big fish in the coaching staff or coaching candidate pool right now. And Anthony Weaver, again, has interviewed for the Commanders head coaching position, but also interviewed for the Miami Dolphins defensive coordinator position. So he's a candidate to watch as well. You look at Denard Wilson, the Ravens secondary coach, and he's getting defensive coordinator interviews, crazy amount. I think if I'm not mistaken, it's Titans, Rams, Giants, and Packers. And I had somebody tell me that Wilson is at the top of the list or near the top of the list for the Packers. So we're going to see how that, a ton of interest in Denard Wilson. Zach Orr also an interview with the Green Bay Packers, their linebackers coach. So that's another guy. Greg Lewis got an offensive coordinator interview with the New Orleans Saints. He's the Ravens wide receiver coach. So all across the board here, Ravens positional coaches plus Mike Macdonald are getting, even, Todd Monken had interviews, although I think Todd Monken's going to return here. But you have all these different coaches, and it speaks to the coaching staff that Baltimore put together this year. And I was very impressed personally. If you were listening to me on Locked On Ravens beforehand, if you were with me during the offseason before this year started, I was very impressed with Baltimore's coaching staff with the blend of veteran coaches and young coaches. But this is kind of the game you play, right? You put together a great coaching staff, you have a great year like the Ravens did, multiple positional groups excel, and all of a sudden, we're in this conversation now. So if Mike Macdonald gets hired away, whether it's today, tomorrow, whenever, we're going to go live on Locked On Ravens to talk about it and obviously build out episodes around that. Hopefully it does not happen. Maybe Mike Macdonald takes the Ben Johnson route and says, hey, you know what? I want to finish what I started here in Baltimore, much like Ben Johnson is saying he wants to finish what he started in Detroit. But the allure of a head coaching option for some coaches, that's for a lot of coaches, honestly, that's what they want. That's what they dream of, to have your own organization, be the head man. But some guys just like being coordinators. And Mike Macdonald, he's a young up-and-coming defensive mind. And a lot of people would, I think, love to have him as their head coach. In the John Harbaugh conversation, I think, again, as I've said here on Locked On Ravens, they're not going to fire him. I mean, I'd be floored if they did. The conversations can be had, and we've certainly had those throughout the week. But Eric DeCosta and John Harbaugh are scheduled to speak on Friday to the media for their end-of-season press conference. We'll be going live after that as well, right out, probably soon after that. So a lot of crazy stuff going on with the Ravens right now, and I think it's almost double disappointing, right? Because if the Ravens had won the Super Bowl this season and Mike Macdonald were to leave, it would have been like, all right, they won the Super Bowl, they got the job done. Mike Macdonald has earned this, and not that he hasn't earned it because they didn't win. He certainly has. But it would feel like less of a blow if some of these coaches were to leave if the Ravens had won the Super Bowl. Now it's like, man, these guys might leave and they didn't get the job done, and how are the Ravens going to reset? So I think that's definitely something to monitor with this whole thing. But obviously the one that would definitely hurt the most would be Mike Macdonald walking out that door. But it would have to be an internal guy. I feel like when you weigh internal versus external right now, the Ravens defense was incredible, and you want to keep the system. And I think if it is Anthony Weaver, if it is Denard Wilson, one of those guys, I'm fine with that. And Mike Macdonald leaves, but obviously you want to keep Mike Macdonald in the building. So the John Harbaugh coaching tree has the potential to expand even further, and it certainly has expanded very far during his tenure. But now we have to kind of wait and see how the coaching carousel shakes out, because it's not just the two head coaching openings that are left with Washington and Seattle. Obviously, those defensive coordinator openings, offensive coordinator openings, they're still looking to get filled as well. So that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Again, really appreciate everybody tuning in. If you're new to the channel, you liked what you heard today, liked what you watched, be sure to subscribe, follow along, audio form, video form, or however you listened. If you're somewhere in the middle of an everydayer and a new listener, you check in a couple of times, be sure to hit that subscribe button. It helps me out a ton, helps me put the show in front of new Ravens fans and NFL fans. It helps grow the community here on Locked On Ravens, which has been incredible. And if you're an everydayer, of course, thanks so much for tuning in every single day. Really appreciate you as well. Coming up tomorrow, more Ravens content here on Locked On Ravens. As always, stay tuned. See you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.